unstructured data. Let's look at these one by one. Structured data. This structured data, as by the name, it adheres to a fixed schema. It follows a fixed structure. So all of the data will have the same fields or properties. This is often stored in database tables with rows and columns. And multiple tables can reference from one another using key values. For example, in SQL, you have databases. Tables have a schema with rows and columns where every row has same fields. While on the other hand, the semi-structured, as clear from the name, is the information that has some structure but allows some variation between the entities. This is a more flexible option. For example, most customers may have an email address, some might have multiple email addresses, and some might have none at all. So all these instances can have their places on the same file. You don't have a strict schema to follow. Best example is the JSON file in front of you. We'll take a little bit more about it in a little while. But on the other extreme, if you observe, is the unstructured data. Unstructured data, again, by the name, it does not follow any schema. Any data that is stored without a schema to organize the discrete values. The examples are your documents, images, audio, video, binary files, text files. Anything that does not fall into the structured and semi-structured data is your unstructured data. I hope you're all with me till now. Next, we will look at how is data being stored. Just think for a moment, where would you store your data? If you're thinking files or databases, you're right. Let's talk about the files first. Files can be stored in your local file systems on the hard disk of your personal computer, USB drives, shared file systems, central storage location in the cloud, while the option cloud being the cost-effective, secure, and reliable storage solution for large volumes of data these days. The specific file format that you use to store data will depend on multiple factors. The type of data being stored, is it semi-structured, structured, or unstructured? What kind of applications are going to read, write, and process this data? Who needs to read these files, humans or computers? Based on all these factors, we are going to discuss the most popular file formats here. First, being the delimited text files. In these types of files, the data is stored in the plain text format with specific field elevators and row terminators. It is simply called delimited because we're using delimiters or commas to separate the values of the fields. The most common format for these types of files is CSV files. You must have heard of comma-separated files, in which the fields are separated by commas and rows and are terminated by a new line or a slash. Optionally, the first line may include the field names, and the other common formats like this would be TSVs, tab-separated values. Delimited text is a good choice for JSON, JavaScript object notation. This is a very famous hierarchical document format which is used to define the data entities which has multiple attributes. It's a very flexible format and is good for both structured and semi-structured data. In the example, observe that the objects are enclosed in braces like the customer, and the collection, which is say the contact, they are added in the closed square brackets. And attributes are represented as a key value pair separated by commas. Next is XML. This is also a very famous human readable data format. It's called extensible markup language. This is largely in this format that the data is enclosed in the angle brackets. We use tags to define the elements and attributes as shown in the example. It's a similar data, but it's just represented in the XML language. Ultimately, all the files are stored as binary data, but in the human readable format, the binary data are mapped to printable characters. Some file formats, specifically for unstructured data, they store the data as raw binary, which must be interpreted by the applications. Very common type of examples are images, videos, audio, and application-specific documents. We also call them blobs in short, the binary large objects. These were some of the examples which are human-readable formats, while human-readable formats are structured and semi-structured that typically not optimized for storage space and processing. Sometimes you must enable compression or enable indexing for efficient storage and processing. These are called optimized file formats. The examples are Avro, ORC, and Parquet. The Avro is a row-based format. It was created by Apache, and ORC and Parquet are the column-based formats. Avro is a very good format for compressing data and minimizing storage in the network bandwidth requirements, while in the ORC, the data is in two columns rather than rows. Parquet file includes the metadata that describes a set of rows found in each chunk. The application can use this metadata to quickly locate the correct chunk for a given set of rows and retrieve the right data. It supports very efficient compression, encoding schemes, and let's think of what is the other way of storing and managing the data. Databases. Databases are used to define a central system where data can be stored and queried majorly. There are two types of databases that we talk about: relational databases and non-relational databases. Relational databases are most used to store and query structured data. This data is stored in tables that represent entities. Each instance of this entity is assigned a primary key, which uniquely identifies this data, and this key is used to reference the other instances. And just observe the example on the screen. The customer's primary key ID can be referenced in the sale order to indicate which customer placed which order and when. This also eliminates the duplication of data. Now, the details of the customer is only stored once in the customer table. These tables can be queried using the SQL. You must have already heard or used SQL. It is your structured query language. The SQL is relational databases. On the other hand, the data management systems that do not apply a relational schema to the data, we call them non-relational databases or NoSQL databases. Better for common types of non-relational or NoSQL databases. Commonly in use, the first 20 already, you must have already seen it as a simple key value format. The key is unique and every key has an associated value to it. Next is the document databases, which are very specific form of a key and database. The best example is the JSON. Then you have the column family databases, where the tabular data is having the rows and columns, but you can divide them into columns and families. Like you can divide this customer as one family and product as another, and they're logically related using the keys. Then you have graph databases, where your entities as nodes are interlinked. Ben works in the hardware and reports to Sue. So these are some of the basic about relational and non-relational database.